imagine that in 2020 there was this abrupt change, and then like most districts, especially in California, they had given every student an A, right? All those missing assessments are like, well, we're just gonna have a lot of grace. But like there was no accountability, so there wasn't any like follow through on learning.
Hey, welcome to another episode of the Selfish Show. This is a show where we talk about the self-ish, and I selfishly ask questions of my friends. And today we have Dr. Dave Rankowitz. You're a doctor these days, huh?
Yeah, things have changed since I was a little middle schooler when you met me.
We were trying to figure out, let's see, 90, 99, 97? No, 99 is when I left. So that's 26 years ago. How old are you now, man?
42.
I think you're. Oh gosh, that's a long time. I think I saw you like 10 years, like 10 years later. I think I saw you at the Delta. Like we hung out then for just like a couple of days or whatever. But it's been, you know.
That's right. Yeah. Yes. Yeah. Time
So the
flies.
last time, yeah, man, the last time, well, but then the last time we really hung out, you were still just a student, and now you just work with students. Like part of the conversation. Part of the reason why I wanted Dave on the show is because you are an educator. Can you tell us a little bit? Tell me a little bit about your journey, like to being where you're at now, just professionally.
Yeah. So you remember you and I, we used to go to the church, the First Baptist Church together, and that was my home church. You ended up leaving. You had mentored me to play guitar, and then I ended up like playing in a youth group, and then I felt
Yeah,
really called to do it. And then I got a business degree, and then our youth pastor Steve was like, "You should go to seminary and get your master's because you work a lot with speaking in front of people and to be
yeah,
theologically strong." Well, anyways, I worked with kids all the time, and then nothing really opened up in that world for me, but I still like served, and then met my wife. She was going to be a teacher, and so I was like, I'm going to be a teacher too. And her dad was a teacher, and so got into that, and it was really cool because I love working with kids, and I was really good at teaching because I would sub, and really enjoyed it. And when I got into leadership at every school I was at, so the principals I worked with, they were always like grooming me. And then I worked at high school and was an apartment sheriff, and my principal's like, you should go get your doctorate. Got into that, got into leadership doctorate locally. And then I got a position as an administrator and did that. Became a principal for a year, and then so that was in California, and then felt called out of state. So we moved to Tennessee, and I ended up getting a position at a great school out here as an assistant principal. And so it's been really cool because like I've been able to get like into a lot of different contexts with like
yeah,
diverse kids, kids that are really high performing, and then like now I'm in a different part of America. But it's kind of cool to see
yeah,
like similarities across the nation and differences. And so it's been
yeah.
so yeah, that's kind of what happened with me. So.
Well, so and did you get your doctorate from USC? And then what was your research focus?
My dissertation on superintendent preparation, recruitment, and retention in K-12 schools. Yeah, I was like,
Okay.
I'm just one day, but now I'm like, I don't know, but if it comes about, I'll do it. So, but that's it.
Um, So part of the reason why we're having this conversation is because I posted something about the pandemic, and I wasn't teaching during that time, but I watched a lot of teachers, and I happened to be at a friend's house, and they were teachers, and we were just hanging out at their house, and they were teaching the class, and I was like, they're just doing what they do in as if they were all together in the classroom, but they didn't necessarily adjust for the environment change for the online space. And again, no fault of their own because like I think everybody got like just like like there was a day where you're teaching face to face, and then the next day we're like, all right, what do we do? There was no infrastructure, there was no warning, there wasn't anything. So again, I don't say it to like bash on teachers or the educational system or anything like that. The context of that conversation was more about Gen Z and like the impact of that. As an educator, like you were in education during that time. Tell me about that time as an administrator. Were you a principal at that time?
I was an assistant principal at that time when we went into the pandemic.
Okay, and
Sorry, it was like right away that we had gone into the lockdown, and I remember it was a rainy Friday afternoon on the 13th, and then our superintendent's like we're closing, and so we got every Chromebook available, and we started lining kids up by the tech library to pick them up, and our teachers like, "What's going on?" And then there were like 2 weeks of just no school because they're like, "Well, 2 weeks to flatten the curve," and like nothing was happening, and then no one came back, but our teachers,
yeah,
right, their pedagogy was all in the classroom, like in person, and so all of their tools were in person. Only the most innovative teachers were actually using like Canvas or Google Drive or Google Classroom and
yeah,
such. And so then that kind of forced everyone to learn that. But it also forced them to do it
yeah,
with a lot of support because there was no training. You go to a
right.
preparation program pre-pandemic and it was not like the thing. It was very innovative to do. Yeah, if you did that. People did the same thing.
So yeah. And it created more work for teachers. Like they were doing more work because one, they were learning how to do it online, but then they didn't really learn how to do it online. They were just taking their face-to-face thing. And I mean, it was frustrating, I think, for students. I think it was also frustrating for teachers because they're like, you have to do this. You know what I mean? And like the students are like, well, we have to do this, but not really. And anything else out of that time? So students were really, I know teachers were really frustrated. Like, what was the conversation with teachers like?
It was really difficult because like in a classroom, and this was like the comment I made, like in a in-person classroom, there are so many nuances to learning because you're like trying to learn the modeling of the teacher or whatever the topic is. Students are like
Yeah,
other students and gleaning off like what they're learning. And so like that whole idea of like Vygotsky's social cultural learning, like that was lost because kids
yeah,
their screens are off and
yeah.
it's because they're embarrassed because they might live in like not as nice of a house as their name. Their
Right, right.
and then the other thing they were like, well, if no one else has their screen, I'm not going to have my screen. So then teachers were really frustrated because there was no, they could not get any feedback from kids. Like as a teacher, you have to always like check and monitor your kids like
Yeah,
almost like a patient in a hospital.
yeah,
You have tests going on, you're doing formative assessment, you're checking on how they're doing, and then you're giving
yeah,
active feedback. So that feedback loop, it was not happening at that time. It was very like
yeah.
they may have gotten an assessment and then they just like graded on Canvas and they're like, "There's your grade," and that's it.
Yeah, I remember, like I said, I was sitting in my friend's house and they were teaching and like she was calling on students and just like kept calling on students and not getting any kind of response. Like eventually it would come because I don't know whether they stepped away or they forgot that they were muted or whatever. Like it was just really tough, I think, for teachers and for students. But you've worked, I mean, you've been in education since then, right? Like it's all like that's what you've been doing. Can you speak to the impact that that learning environment has had on current students, both Gen Z or Gen Alpha?
Yeah, so I deal with a lot of Gen Z students at the high school, and so imagine that in 2020 there was this abrupt change, and then like most districts, especially in California, they had given every student an A, right? All those missing assessments are like, well, we're just gonna have a lot of grace, but like there was no accountability, so there wasn't any like follow through on learning, and a lot of kids that shouldn't have progressed in the curriculum, they kept our so there's a lot of prior knowledge missing. Like anyone and all the kids from kindergarten up until 12th grade, you have prior knowledge that's missing at some point at that level. So like we are
Yeah,
dealing with that at the high school. And we're like 5 years back. So you're talking about kids that are in like fourth grade, fifth grade, up to seventh grade at the high school level. They have that prior knowledge that's missing. And so especially like reading and math, you'll have students that are missing that those skills earlier. And our teachers are noticing that. And some kids are doing great. They caught up, and others they're still struggling.
Okay, so you're telling me, sorry, you were saying something about students, prior knowledge, they all got A's.
Yeah. So just to kind of reiterate, like students, there was no accountability in that 2020 year. And so there was a gap in knowledge that they were supposed to be learning in the progression of the curriculum. And so you're now at the high school, that was like 4 or 5 years ago. So we're looking at our kids that are from ninth to 10th grade. So 5 years ago, you're talking about kids, our kids were, what was that? Fourth grade to seventh grade. So there's kids that have missing prior knowledge. And so that compounds year after year. So our teachers have an extra load on
Yeah.
catch them up, and our kids have an extra load on them. So like this is really much heavier than normal for when I was in high school or even you were in high school. And so and it's tough because it's broadening the gap for some kids. Like some kids are not they're not progressing as fast as other kids. And then some families they did well and kids caught up. So but we have great teachers. I mean, like the big thing is that they look at assessments and they're thinking about how do we get kids back up to date. So on what they need to know at that moment. So
So there are, I mean, but that's for the younger kids, like those that graduated like that year or maybe the year after. They don't have that. They just went right into college and all these it's interesting, all these college professors and these like admissions people are saying like, yeah, these kids are well, they were saying they were way unprepared 10 years ago, but even more so now. And then the same thing happened in college. There was a year, like there's like this, I don't know if you guys are feeling it in Tennessee, but there's a huge teacher shortage because all those people that were working on their degrees, like same thing happened to them, but then, like that year, you're missing that year of teacher supply. You know what I'm saying? Like going back into educational system. And I don't know if you guys experienced that like missing year of like, wait, well, we don't have nobody graduated. Or if they did graduate, they weren't really ready. But and I talked to one, like, we talked to one of these teacher. She wasn't ready. She was in special ed, but they didn't have any teachers. So they just threw her in and she's like learning like on the job. I mean, was that like, can you speak to that? Like what happened to college students and, just kind of on that end of it.
yeah, so it's a double-edged sword. So like in regards to the teacher supply, like from 2020 to now, there's a pivot that's happened. But we did have a shortage. Like when I was a principal, like we were struggling to get positions filled because we had a
Yeah.
couple of issues. You had like the pipeline of new teachers were not. It's a the pipeline didn't include a lot of teachers because there's a huge investment for a teacher to enter the workforce. Like they have to do all of their degree, and then usually
Yeah.
the state will say you also need to do your teaching credential or endorsement. So then they have to pay for
Yeah.
a year of school. And then sometimes they're like, "Oh, I'll get a master's." And then on top of that, they have to do a TPA, which is a huge project for the state. And then they have to do student teaching. So like the pipeline, that's one of the things that's really hard for to recruit new teachers. And it was exacerbated by like we had a bunch of great teachers that were near retirement that decided in 2020 they're like, I'm out. It's not my thing anymore. And then
Yeah.
a lot of districts they also did like the golden handshakes. So that we were losing great teachers. In Tennessee, like just this year, so I get to oversee like hiring at my school, and this is the year that I felt that we are plateauing, that we have, I think the job market shifted where we have less openings and more people in the job pool. And I don't know if that's related.
Wow.
I don't know if it's related to
Yeah.
the local thing or if it's like a time of recession or a time of like balance.
Yeah.
I'm not sure what that is.
Yeah. So you guys have a plan for those that are still in high school, to kind of figure out those gaps.
Yeah, we have like assessments in place. So the teachers year after year, it kind of they start adjusting and they normalize the kids and they level them based upon like benchmark assessments or end of course assessments.
Yeah. But then all the ones that didn't have that or graduated in 2020, 2021, maybe even 2022, they're like, what do you think? Like, what have you seen? I mean, I know they're not like your students, but like, what have you seen? Like speak to that if you could.
Yeah, so I get to see like new teachers that are the graduates from 2020 forward. So it's been a few or so they're coming into the workforce. And so the benefit to all of that, what's happened is that they experienced the student side of the pandemic. And so now as a teacher, they're able to really incorporate that technology and do it in an innovative way, coming in straight, fresh out of a program,
Yeah,
which is
yeah,
really neat to see because like the kids really connect and then they're able to implement things that are helpful for students.
yeah. Can you tell me now, like look back at 2020, what could have been, I mean, not necessarily the training, but like the comment that you responded to was we just took the face-to-face pedagogy and we just did it in an online space. Like now looking back at it, what would you have done? How would you have like helped teachers make that transition? Now knowing what you know.
That's a really hard question because like you're up against the regulations of having school.
Okay.
You know what I mean?
But these kids think digitally, like they process digitally. I found like I remember when I was working on my dissertation, like I would write stuff out and it was easy to move chunks of my dissertation around, you know what I mean? And like reorganize. I wasn't doing that on paper. I was like doing that digitally. And so like that was the first time where I was like, whoa, I am processing digitally this dissertation. Like it's not like before I used to like write it out or like write out an outline, but like I was like moving chunks and I wasn't really rewriting sections, but like I was organizing sections in such a way that it flowed a little better for me. And I that's when I first realized like even as a Gen Xer, like I am already thinking digitally. I'm using the digital tools to help me to process like my ideas. Kids just think that way. They have a reset button. You know what I mean? And then there's all the things like they don't have grit or they have a short attention span. Like what are some of those things that you guys do, or how do you guys like educate in light of digital native think processing digitally?
Yeah, so the latest generation's gonna be the most techie. But their version of techie is not the formalized version that they have to get to when they participate in like the world because they're on TikTok and then they use their D slang and like their shortened text messaging. And so yes, they are very good at using what the biggest thing right now, and it's like totally forefront of education is AI. They use the chat GPT and AI. So like, and parents are they know about it. This is a discussion at my school, which is really cool. But they like have chat GPT produce like outlines for them or they're producing ideas. They might curate a bunch of like sources from original documents and then they put it into chat GPT and they're like, give me a summary
Yeah,
and then they have to write something out of that. And they're very innovative in their use. I have kids that are like taking teacher notes because that they know like teachers are busy and they're like, I use study notes and I'm going to use ChatGPT to give me a study guide, give me flash.
yeah,
And so
yeah.
the kids are like doing a lot of innovative things, but it's changing pedagogy now. And it's a
It
discussion
is.
I just had with my teaching staff. I said, like AI is not going away.
No.
So what we need to do is like we need to provide boundaries and like intentionally incorporate it into our classroom and tell like there's a level of use of AI for this particular assignment. Like you might put a boundary and say, hey, on this AI or for this assignment, you can use this certain level of AI to curate your ideas. And then I like you to apply your learning in this way to extend it. It's kind of the use of a calculator. It's right. You're taking that cognitive load off of a certain piece of the assignment so that the kids could focus on the next piece of assignment. So it's much more enriched and enhanced.
Yeah, I mean, I was, when I thought through this, like 9 years ago was the last time I was a full-time professor, where it was just all that I did. And information literacy was just like we were just starting to talk about information literacy like 10, 15 years ago, like working that into the curriculum. And now these kids can run circles around us. You know what I mean? Like, because they have a good command of the tools. And like, yeah, no, that's really interesting that you guys are having those conversations, and you guys are like, um, yeah, on top of it. And you're not afraid of it. I think that's the thing. A lot of people are just so afraid of it.
Are a lot of teachers afraid of it, but just to add to it, like College Board is a advanced placement program. Like kids get like college credit through advanced placement. Even
Yeah,
they
yeah.
are encouraging the use of chat GPT or AI tools to engage students in the learning. So it's not going away. So it is something that we have to catch up on as educators to help support our kids to still learn, but like defining learning differently.
Right. Yeah. Well, man, those are all wonderful thoughts. Maybe we can, in the summer when you're off, we're going to
Yes.
have much longer conversations about this. But I really wanted to just, get your insight, like while we were still kind of having those conversations. And I appreciate your mind. This has given me like some food for thought. I have like so many more questions now. And so like in June when you're off and you're not teaching and working full time, we're gonna get back online and record some of these. So
Let's do it, man. I'm down. This was exciting
no,
to see your channel, and I was like, "Hey, it's Lem. I remember Lem." And then I'm interesting, and I'm like, "This is my world, so I have a lot to say." And
I love it. I love it. Well, I'll set this up. We'll record it, and like I'm gonna write up my questions for further conversation. But thanks for being on the show, my friend.
oh, thanks for having me. This was awesome.
Right on.